give you my hand, travel with you to West Virginia.
You know, sometimes when I'm making them, I start to really get into those songs, and then I realize the subject matter, or the reason I'm making it, and the sheer ridiculous nature of it. It strikes me like a bronze cast gong right in the solar plexus, and I'm reminded what a nerd I am. Well, but in any case, we'll continue to nerd on here.
The good old West Virginia. That old Appalachia honesty. Why, just look at these pictures. Look at that window. You can't mean to tell me that that's intention. Come on, man. They went ahead and did the drawing for me. Exceptional work, West Virginia. You're to be commended.
How many artists can make the same picture? One's a little finer, one's a little richer.
How is everyone? I'm assuming that you're all alive and at leisure. Look, looks like a little face already. Oh, God, we've begun already. It never stops, folks. It never stops. You know, it's just one thing after another. Just leaping from one comedic disaster to another. And that's it. That's all we got. Oh, I forgot. I knew there was something I was forgetting. There usually is. Would you just look at that? Endless wire pump. These are blueprints, you know. Could come in handy one day. In case you're, building a freaking tower. What the hell's this? These documents came from King Arthur. We're sure of it. I'm not sure of it. What the hell those are? Those missiles? A roller mill? Why has it got bolts in the chamber? Let's read on and find out. If we dare, of course. Only the bravest of adventurers go this far. You know, it's bad enough that I make you sit through a crappy intro song. Then you gotta suffer through a lengthy preamble? That ain't my America. There's a bird's eye view of Raynell. Bird's eye view? Maybe if you're a duck. The old sawmill. The old drawing of a sawmill. Look at that little ingenious endless saw. That's pretty great. Never wondered how they worked, but now I know. And what are we looking at here? Well, this here appears to be the Meadow River Lumber Company, which was at its peak the world's largest hardwood sawmill in the world. These pictures appear to be about from, the 80s, based on this vehicle here. That we're told, as far as Raynell, West Virginia went, there were 10 million acres of virgin hardwood timber in 1870. Wow, that's a lot. And by 1910, only 1.5 million remained. 10 years later, virgin forests were a thing of the past. What monsters. From the production of less than 100 million board feet of lumber in 1870, the West Virginia lumbering industry expanded to produce over 800 million feet of boards per year at the turn of the century. Gem it. In 1909, the peak year of production, the amount of lumber sawed reached nearly 1.5 billion board feet. Damn. After such monstrous output, of course, the extraordinary changes had to take place in the lumbering industry. It goes to saying the expanded production was mostly, probably notably, the result of the conjunction of technological developments in the industry, yes, and of course the extension of the railroad throughout the state. This had far-reaching consequences in the lives of the people who lived in the hills and the hollows. Those 40 years saw the change from an industry composed of small local operations, selectively cutting only the choicest of timber in backwoods hollows, to an industry of huge factory complexes which swallowed whole forests and shipped their products to all parts of the nation, as we so often see in so many industries. In 1810, there were 50 water-powered sawmills in one county alone. Safe to say that hundreds of these mills were in operation throughout the state. And even after the coming of the steam-powered mill, the water-powered mills remained prominent. They used to use a whipsaw before this, powered by 2 men. Pushed and pulled a 7-foot blade through broad axe-squared timber, placing it on a trestle or on a pit. 1 man on the timber, the other beneath it. And in this way, 2 men could saw 100 feet of rough planking in a long and very tired day. The up and down sawmill basically was a whipsaw blade stretched between 2 vertically moving gates. As of 1984, there was only 1 remaining sash mill in the state, Jackson's Mill, near Jane Lou, west of the Hammer Mill in Pendleton County, which was burnt to the ground in the mid-40s. Technology that you see strewn about in the floor before you is Rogers Mill, which of course turned into the circular saw powered by steam, which is a bit portable. Ironically, invented by a man named Miller, was the steam mill. But sadly, the arrival of the railroads in West Virginia marked the beginning of the first phase of the great lumber boom. Great fortunes were made, and the state was stripped of its virgin forests. I mean, let's be honest, they probably weren't virgin. The transition from water mills and small steam mills to huge mills operating as big business was almost instantaneous once the tracks were laid. Steam technology had just been waiting in the wing. As with most technological developments, I find that previous technologies reached their most elaborate and even monstrous forms on the eve of the introduction of more sophisticated ways of doing things. As it was then with other things, so it is and was with lumber mills. The old water-powered mill, blades made 80 strokes per minute, based on observation. Now as many as 40 blades made 215 strokes per minute. Yish. Producing 130,000 board feet of lumber daily. And there were 82 sawmills of this type in West Virginia in that era, and the most accessible timber was rapidly being cleared. Dwindling supplies of timber along the mainline railroads brought about pressure for the adoption of the less wasteful band mill, which was developed in France. 1869, some lumbermen began to put them into effect. Once all the timber and lumber was cut down along the railroad, they had to move into the backcountry. Clear now with enough capital to build their own logging railways. And just like in the coal industry, the advent of new transport facilities facilitated the rapid development of even the most remote and sparsely settled areas. And thus, the beginnings of Meadow River Lumber Company were here in all its glory. Well, what remains of it. This was formed in 1906 by the brothers John and Thomas Rain. Pooled their resources, Rain and Rain of Empire, Pennsylvania, and Rain Andrews of Evanwood. They purchased 12,000 acres of a sum of $360,000. The construction of a mill, Thomas Rain was elected president. Later on, they added 20,000 acres. This log was sawed in September of 1910. Look at that old world tech. In 1906, when John River Basin was still a stand of virgin timber, hardwoods and hemlock, white and red oak, yellow poplar, chestnut, scattered stands of beech, a birch, walnut, hickory, butternut, cherry, maple, cucumber, locust. All this timber still remained untouched, because this region was far from market for profitable wagoneering. And these trees escaped the woodman's axe until those pioneering days were past, and these monsters moved into town. Initial projections put the life of the lumber company about 25 years, a fairly long span for a period. However, the mill outstayed its welcome for 60 years, and became the largest hardwood mill in the world. Noted for its efficient organization, versatility, and using every last scrap of lumber, they made Meadow River Basin Great Forest completely disappear. The mill was large enough to handle whole trees with only the tops and branches removed. It's the impressive operation, and quite the sad exploitation. Power was provided by a heavy-duty cordless engine, 48-inch stroke. Quite impressive for those times. The scale of operations and the organization of the Meadow River Lumber Company carried over into the structure of the town of Raynell as well. The town owes its existence to the lumber industry. Prior to 1905, of course, we're told the surrounding area had been a region of scattered farms and small-scale sawmills. To lure workers from their homes in the rains built an entire town. These houses were described as being the best hardwood sawmill town in the country. Workmen's houses are built with a view to comfort, sanitation. All are well-constructed frame houses, plastered, papered, and painted white, supplied purest running water, most of them with modern bathrooms. Each house has its own garden patch. Some houses are furnished in native hardwood, steam-heated, electric lighted, electric cleaned, and pair favorably with the best type of city cottages. And these houses were and far remain far superior to the jerry-built structures that the coal industry was providing for its workers. They built a church, a library, a school, a restaurant, all of it to recruit labor and ensure its dependability. They were used as an attractive incentive to encourage workers to shed their rural habits and adapt to an industrial organization of work. Married workers were allowed to rent one of the company's 128 houses. In 1942, one 8-room house rented for $8.75 per month. Good God. Mr. Raines said the migratory habits of the woodman are proverbial. His treasure is, there will his heart be also. We must see to it that the treasure is not met in moonshine or other stimulating dopes. Incorporated in 1913, nearly the entire towns and 1,000 residents were employees of the company and their dependents. And the name Rennell had its origin in the founder's name, and that of Thomas Raines' wife and daughter, both named Nell. The officials, the postmaster, the bank president, the leader of the town band, were drawn from the company's upper elite, while the mayor rotated amongst the company managers. The only church in town was a Methodist Episcopal built by the company, and John Rain himself was the overseer of the life of the town from his vantage point on the board of temperance, prohibition, and public moral. A real control freak, an amateur psychologist, and what I believe we want is to satisfy primarily the mind of the laborer, place him where he'll be interested in the accomplishment of a good piece of work. He attacked the hourly wages system, an economic crime, removing the incentive for good work. He sought to prevent the division between workers and management. He sought to minimize the effect of on-the-job social relations. He sought to ban outright work hanky-panky. Rain's concept gave the workers a voice. In a rather quaint little creepy town, almost very cult-like. Cute in its own way, but, a little too uniform for my liking. And now, as a result, milling in the area has returned to an early stage of small family-owned sawmills, living on the coals and the regrowth of the vanished virgin forest. Look at him trying to get all artsy. Look at this guy. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't even know what this is. There is no info about this, but brick? Holes in the brick? That is sweet. How ingenious is that? I don't know what purpose it serves, but some sort of ventilation. Hey, here's our guy here. Just what even is that? What is that? How can anyone actually say that that's deliberate? That's so stupid. So anytime it rains, it can just pour in there? No way. No way that's the whole story. No. And what you're seeing here is actually Master Armorer's house, Harper's Ferry. That's right. The Harper's Ferry. But nah, they don't really have too much to say about it. Yeah, that's not weird. But it's been through some ish, can say for certain. Very odd place. Clearly seen better days. Oh yes, must document these items. Mysteries abound here in West Virginia. I believe this is the Morrill House, also in Harper's Ferry National Historic Park. And it looks as if it's had some restoration work done. It was designed and erected in 1857 by the federal government, we're told. It's supposed to be the residence for one of the chief clerks. Following the Civil War, it was acquired by Storer College. Original plans or old views have been discovered. Appears only to have been slightly modified. The original stair to the basement was closed off. Porches are added later. And it's wall-bearing brick masonry. But the basement, and they're told it is sound and plumb. Foundation walls are 2 feet thick and they terminate in a water table. Safe to say it was definitely built to last. That is a balcony that I would probably stay off of. After the dissolution of the Storer College, the building was acquired by the National Park Service and now serves as an office. Look at that. How absolutely boring. I guess technically they did a good job on the remodel, but thanks America. I prefer the old beat-up version of that. Soulless. This here's the paymaster's quarters. Also donated to the college. Used as a hotel even. Why, when you're around for hundreds of years, you fill all sorts of roles. This too has a basement. This too is now owned by the National Park Service, where it serves as a museum.
This building was erected in 1839 by William and Samuel B. Anderson and Dr. George B. Stevenson, on land which was originally part of the Wager 6-acre reservation. Descendants of Robert Harper, been used as a warehouse, a tavern, and a residence. Hopefully not at the same time. Located in the downtown section of Harper's Ferry during the Civil War was a backdrop for the Armory Engine House, which was a refuge for John Brown during his infamous raid. They claim that this was a one-story structure when they added a second story of stone between 1847 and 1852. In 1856, they removed the front of the building to widen the street. The remaining part is the present building. And they added a new front, and the new front porch. And then this was removed also. The name Whitehall is found in a letter from Superintendent Henry Clow in 1855, where he referred to the structure as a drinking house known as Whitehall. Now, though we were told they added a second story on to the first, there is a basement in here, which is dirt, with unfinished walls, so that makes no sense. Because here it says, it consists of 2 stories, a basement and an attic. So riddle me that, America. So they say when they added a second story, what, they added the first floor? Or what? Because if it already had a basement, then that would be the second story. It don't make no damn sense. Look at this little beady-eyed bastard. It's like he knows, but he ain't talking. Hey. No, what, pal? Fuck yourself, bro. You think it's funny, huh? Very original. Posts which I pointed out in previous videos that are often seen petrified in the sides of towers and mistaken for stone. But stone they are not. Hey, get out of here, bro. Ooh, earthquake. Here's that attic. Looking very, crime scene-ish. Here it is as a completely finished tavern, decked out with a somewhat full bar, maybe for the era. No bar stools, a dog dish, a riveting game of checkers, and a very sexy furnace in the corner. Just my kind of hangout. No people in it either. That's great. So it's basically self-serve. Here's the old John C. Unseld building, built sometime in the 30s, known as a landmark in the immediate vicinity of the capture of John Brown. It also lends considerable character to the town. Now, this area was built, like all this, on yeesh. Happened. That was quick. Unless that's the backside. And yes, it is. What happened here? Robert Harper, who operated the ferry, the confluence of the Potomac and the Shenandoah rivers. He owned all this land initially. He sold it to the Wager family, who sold it to Philip Coons, who built the structure in 1838. Then he sold the property to a group of 51 men. These men were unable to fulfill the requirements of the sale, and Coons repurchased the property in 1841. What the 51 men? What kind of requirements exceeded 51 men's abilities? Very weird. Now, there's no evidence that anyone historic participating in any historic event ever used the building, but still, it was part of the scene, so. At some point, there's a big gap in the chain of ownership, and someone named Mary Murphy passes it on to a family member, Josephine Murphy, who then sold it to the state of West Virginia, who then deeded it to the government on May 13th, 1955. None of that's very suspicious at all. You know, that same old story. Inherited from someone to a last surviving female relative who then randomly gives it to the government. We're told it's a 3-story basement wielding with a ruined section at the rear. The sidewalls are the adjacent sidewalls of the other buildings. The foundations and basement walls are rubble masonry of local stone and extend above the grade 2 feet. In 56, the National Park Service replaced the roof. Why is the National Park Service out here replacing roofs? Well, whatever the reason. Girard Wager, this here's your building. Now, tradition places this structure on the site of the original house of Robert Harper, who operated the ferry, as aforementioned, but this has not been documented or in any way substantiated. But during the survey, it was determined that the stone walls of an earlier structure served in part as a foundation for this building. Really? You don't say that the stone walls of an earlier structure were the foundation for the building. You build on top of another building. That's kind of what we suspect. Again, West Virginia, your honesty is just, to be commended. Why, you're confirming my reckless speculation. This one was passed down to a gentleman named Dittmeyer, who, due to a court action, the property was sold. Promptly sold to the state of West Virginia, who then, in turn, deeded it to the government again on May 13th, 1955. The same day, huh? 2 different people sold to the government, huh? Interesting. But again, you have a wall-bearing brick masonry building of 4 stories. Rather bold in the 1800s, making a 4-story building, I guess. And it's still sound and plumb to this day. They say the foundation walls appear to be of various vintage. One section designed for the building, while the remainder obviously consists of partial walls of a previous stone wall. Materials are haphazard. Rubble, squared rubble, brick, wood, and some steel and some iron. Fireplaces are now bricked up. There is no indication of the original system of illumination. I'd say there's no indication of anything resembling any sort of appliance. My bad boy's been stripped, and despite its plumbness, look at the wonky foundation. What the hell's going on here? This here is Harper Ferry Bank, and that little bit of information is all you need to know. Let these gorgeous pictures do the rest of the talking. Why, you can imagine the activity that must have taken place here, can't you? Put yourself there. You can do it. Just imagine you're standing there peeing in the corner. What? That's what it looks like happened there. This is the Attorney Building, which is also part of this old Harper's Ferry State Park. I've got no information on that one. I'm not sure why these historic areas, those historic parks for this Harper's Ferry is so beat up. These buildings are just trashed inside. So I'm guessing that they restored after the survey was conducted. I would imagine. Not that the information has been that compelling, but still. It is what I'm trying to do. That one building doesn't look like it's the only one that's built on top of the rubble of the past. Now does it? Seems to be kind of a theme in the area. Oh man, these are some overbeat down bitchin' properties. I tell you what, great job in that wallpaper. In the basement, out of the mouth of this giant 4-eyed, fire-breathing duck. This here's a door for people with no heads. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hello, hello. Yeah, it looks totally normal. I thought I'd build that too. This is kind of a dumpy stretch here, isn't it? Shepherd's Grist Mill. That's what this is. And with the opportunity here to talk about milling, particularly in the U.S. Grain milling was one of the first examples in which agricultural people harnessed the power of falling water. Now, in the primitive frontier communities, the miller and occasionally the blacksmith were the only two individuals possessing the skills and the necessity for using water-powered machinery. As the communities that had these started to produce a surplus of grain, the income from small merchant mills were helping to balance the cost of goods. Towns like Buffalo, Chicago, Minneapolis, they developed into these massive cities on the basis of their flour milling, and the packing and the shipping and the growth of all the eastern cities created a constant demand for flour and other foodstuffs, which gives millers the incentives to adapt more efficient techniques. And then, of course, like with everything, the development of the railroads facilitated internal communication and disseminated across the nation. During the late 19th century, mills were quick to modernize to increase their output. The transportation revolution allowed just a few companies to take advantage of the economies of scale and eliminate all smaller operations, as we see in every industry, everywhere, all the time. Milling became more concentrated in urban areas with greater access to capital and markets. As a result, the history of flour milling in a particular town is often a revealing look at the relationship between the social, economic, technological aspects of American urban and local history, as evidenced in these ruins here. Now, this mill, erected by Thomas Shepard sometime between 1734 and 1738, probably the first of its kind in the Valley of Virginia. Mr. Shepard settled in the area when it was still a wilderness, received a grant of 222 acres, Governor William Gooch, and the date of the settlement known as Shepherdstown, well, it's named after him. Now, we're told this one guy farmed the 222 acres of his land, laid out 50 acres of it as a town, distributed lots to settlers for 5 shillings per year, as long as they built a dwelling house 20 feet long with a stone or brick chimney. This weird criteria proceeded gradually for 3 decades until in 1764 the town was finally incorporated. He also built the first mill. He acquired 457 adjacent acres from Lord Fairfax, sold 150 acres to Captain Morgan, and dying in 1776. A year after he had received a charter to operate a ferry located here on the river. These photographs, by the way, this next stretch, are just from old mills all across the country, not necessarily in West Virginia. So we're told that from 1870 to 1910, the flour mill industry undergoes a major revolution. At that point, the state of milling in 1870 was basically the same as it had been since 1790, and Oliver Evans automated the flour mill, which through a system of conveyors that made a little small water-driven mill, 1 or 2 man operator. From then on to the invention of the roller mill in the 1870s, all of innovation was basically just a little bit of elaborating on Evans' design. There were larger mills automated, such as those in Richmond, Minneapolis, but the grinding process was kind of the same. Grain was ground with stone burrs that were set close enough to make as much flour as possible in one run, and then they run that product through a bolter, separates the fine particles, the flour, from the middlings, which is like the coarser part, and the coarser from the chaff, which they call the tailings. It's an industry term. You wouldn't understand unless you worked at a mill like I've never. In 1879, Edmond de la Croix, a French immigrant in Minneapolis, starts experiment with purifying or separating these products more efficiently. He worked under conditions of utmost secrecy, which is how we know about it. He builds this purifier that was based on a French machine that was patented in 1860-ish. Up until this point, the middlings had little value, and they were used to make porridge or ship's bread. And the new purifier allowed them to be separated from the bran and reground, which that result became highly superior for baking bread, and they patent flour. Desirability of patent flour encouraged the acceptance of this new process, which the stones were set high or farther apart to get the largest possible amount of middlings. The grains might be ground 7 or 8 times, running through the purifier after each grinding. The object of the first grinding was now to produce as little flour as possible. It kind of eliminates the friction which used to discolor the flour and reduce its ability to rise up. Sounds like we the people have been undergoing a lot of friction ourselves, yes? In any case, the next step in the milling revolution was adoption of the Hungarian system of using rollers instead of stones, and you couple that with the idea that the object is now to granulate the grain instead of pulverizing it, and it takes up less space. Well, the ideal situation for a large proportion of middlings production, and each successive purification, the more and more flour and more middlings. Final result was flour of the highest quality. So by 1880s is the most common system for new mills. The largest impediment into this widespread acceptance of this new process was the demand for power greatly increased. So for small mills on little country streams to operate a whole gaggle of roller mills, and it's out of the question. And so for this reason, initial acceptance of was cold. People that didn't have the kind of water access that Minneapolis has, they were forced to adapt. When water's like erratic or scarce and they had to use steam, when water was plentiful, the most practical thing to do is a turbine or a metal water wheel, which is easier to build but less efficient. Apparently, the water wheel versus turbine debate occupied the mainstream of controversy among wheelwrights and hydraulic engineers for about 40 years, which you can imagine those riveting late-night tavern arguments between the wheelwrights and hydraulic engineers, Then the United States Geographical Survey for some reason got involved in the experiment here, as detailed in the very riveting wheat and flour primer from 1916. And so, to summarize, to circle back, Gen Psaki style, the significance of Shepherd's Mill is that it remains a symbol of several aspects of local, regional, and national development. Probably the first mill in the Valley of Virginia. It shows the critical function of milling in the frontier culture. It sheds light on the rise of major market towns and their cross-cultural natures. The 40-foot steel watermill wheel, as pictured here, and other modernizations, reflect the technological changes on a national scale and the way in which towns like Shepherdson reacted to them. The fact that they knew about these contemporary developments in hydraulics reflects the general revolution in communication which took place at the turn of the century due to advances in transportation, increasing mobility, and the availability of books and papers and catalogs, and made these techniques available to the rural entrepreneur. However, the downside of the transportation revolution is also responsible for the eventual demise of much of rural industry, as you've seen in these dilapidated ruins of all these industries throughout this survey, if you've been following along. It's very riveting, action-packed, adventurous content. And Shepherd's Mill suspended its operations in 1939, because by that time, transportation facilities had increased to the point where large firms controlled all regional and national markets. Small firms with limited production were simply forced to close their doors in face of such powerful competitors, and Shepherd's Mill was too large to exist as merely a local supplier, but not large enough to compete in a broader market. The economy of scale meant the difference between survival or extinction, and this phenomenon affected most of the town's industries. Basically, Shepherdson reverts to its early function as a residential center catering to the needs of the surrounding farms and the local college. The end. This is the Craig Patton House on Elm Grove in the Daniel Boone Park. It was built as a residence for lawyer, clergyman James Craik, grandson of George Washington's physician. Colonel Patton bought the house in 1858. This is an earlier Colonel Patton, who commanded the 22nd Virginia Infantry. His son, George S. Patton, II, was the father of World War II general. 3 generations of Pattons. So connected are these people. And not only was General Patton's great-great-grandfather George Washington's physician, they're also related, being first cousins 6 times removed, as you can see here. In case you need a reminder that almost everyone that's in these fairy tales is related. Patton's also related to 12th U.S. President Zachary Taylor, by way of Colonel James Taylor. They are second cousin 3 times removed. Also second cousin 3 times removed with James Madison, the 4th U.S. President. Also second cousin 4 times removed with Meriwether Lewis of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Also second cousin 7 times removed from Richard Henry Lee, the signer of Declaration of Independence, and Francis Lightfoot Lee as well. Actually, many signers are the second cousins with. John Penn, for example, as you can see here, by way of James Taylor. Also third cousin 5 times removed with Thomas Nelson, by way of Colonel George Reed. And also third cousin 6 times removed with Benjamin Harrison V, the signer of the Declaration of Independence, through Lucy Higginson. Patton also 4th cousins with Johnny Mercer, the co-founder of Capitol Records, by way of General Hugh Mercer. Oh yeah, and also 4th cousin 5 times removed with General Robert E. Lee. Oh yeah, also 4th cousin 5 times removed with William Henry Harrison, the 9th U.S. President. Oh yeah, also 6th cousin to General George Marshall, the guy that wrote the Marshall Plan. He's also related to Johnny Carson, the TV host. 6th cousin 1 time removed. And I forgot about Edward Norton too, he's also related. 4th cousin 2 times removed. And of course, the 9th governor of Virginia, Henry Lee III. Multiple governors actually, including Robert Brooke, the 10th governor of Virginia. And also Thomas Simley, the 2nd and 7th governor of Maryland, 4th cousin, the 40th governor of Virginia, 5th cousin. Adlai Stevenson, the 31st governor, and also his son. And also actor William H. Macy, 6th cousin 2 times removed. Along with 23rd U.S. President Benjamin Harrison. Helen Keller. Supreme Court Justice Edward Douglas White. Actor Randolph Scott. Glenn Close. Meredith Baxter. Admiral Richard Byrd. Jonathan Swift. Steve McQueen. John Dos Passos. Douglas Trumbull. Theodore Roosevelt. Mary Chapin Carpenter. George Mason. George Clinton. Philip Livingston. William Ellery. William Green, 2nd governor of Rhode Island. Potter Braxton. Alexander Spotswood. Eleanor Roosevelt. Lee Harvey Oswald. Also Kit Harington. The First Lady, President Franklin Pierce. In fact, fact, everyone that signed the U.S. Constitution appears to be related. 13th governor of Maryland, another signer of the U.S. Founder of Georgetown, John Taylor Gilman. William Woodbridge, 5th governor of Massachusetts, signer of the Declaration of Independence, signer of the Declaration of Independence, signer of the Declaration of Independence. 2nd governor of Massachusetts, Patrick Henry. Winston Churchill, Douglas MacArthur, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Jack London. Rufus Day, 27th governor of New Hampshire, Titanic victim Arthur Ryerson, signer of the Declaration of Independence, Joan Fontaine, Oliver Wendell Holmes, 16th governor of Maryland, First Lady of President James Garfield, First Lady of President John Adams, founder of Folgo Coffee Company, founder of Post Series, founder of Wharton School, business, inventor of the Dewey Decimal System, 29th governor of Rhode Island, Thomas Jefferson, Samuel Prescott, Brigham Young, 15th governor of Rhode Island, 26th U.S. Secretary of State, signer of the Declaration of Independence, John Kerry, 62nd governor of Massachusetts, Supreme Court Justice Horace Gray, FDR, first governor of Louisiana, John Brown, founder of Rice, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, 40th governor of Maryland, Mayor of New York City Seth Low, Milton Bradley, John Quincy, Samuel Langley, Grover Cleveland, co-founder of University of Chicago, Louisa May Alcott, General George B. McClellan, L. Frank Baum, Eddie Green, Marjorie Post, the founder of General Foods, Admiral George Dewey, founder of 8 Insurance, Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, co-founder of the New York Academy of Science, Eli Whitney, author of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, Charles Darwin, Julia Morton, John Marshall, 10th governor of Tennessee, the British commander at the Siege of Yorktown, George Lord Cornwallis, John Hancock, Katharine Hepburn, Robert Frost, 55th governor of Massachusetts, 45th governor of Maine, Peter Forster, Ray Bradbury, Charles Pillsbury, founder of Pillsbury, serial killer Dr. H.H. Holmes, Mitt Romney, Francis Scott Key, Guy Ritchie, James Taylor, Brian Forst, 51st governor of Massachusetts, Gina Davis, Lucille Ball, J.P. Morgan, author of Little House on the Prairie, Laurie Ingalls Wilder, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Warren G. Harding, 27th governor of Rhode Island, inventor of the Gallup poll, Fanny Farmer, Melvin Douglas, Anna Gunn, Tony Dow, Thomas Dewey, the 47th governor of New York, founder of the Internet Archive, Brewster Kahle, Lewis Carroll, 54th governor of Maine, 54th governor of Connecticut, 1st governor of Wyoming, founder of the Avery Dennison Corporation, 50th governor of Massachusetts, 69th governor of Connecticut, Sam Waterston, 19th U.S. President Rutherford B. Hayes, Christopher Reeve, Ed Danson, inventor of the first liquid-propelled rocket, Robert H. Goddard, Linda Hamilton, founder of Morton Salt Company, NASA astronaut Story Musgrave, John Fairfield, the 13th and 16th governor of Maine, civil rights activist Angela Davis, Jennifer Coolidge, Ellen DeGeneres, CEO of Hewlett Packard, Charlie Day, Tennessee Williams, Humphrey Bogart, William Taft, Edith Wilson, First Lady President Woodrow, founder of the Girl Scouts, Mercury and Apollo astronaut Alan Shepard, 27th U.S. President James Sherman, Buckminster Fuller, Dick Clark, co-founder of Morgan Stanley, Popeye creator John D. Rockefeller, Herbert Hoover, Marilyn Monroe, Grace Slick, Alan Dulles, John Dulles, Amelia Earhart, George Hamilton, Alan Turing, J.K. Simmons, Bill Weld, 16th governor of Massachusetts, English novelist Ian Forster, Calvin Coolidge, first wife of President Theodore Roosevelt, Susan B. Anthony, J.P. Morgan, Sandra Day O'Connor, Liz Claiborne, Gloria Vanderbilt, Upton Sinclair, Anna Faris, President and CEO of NAACP, Alexander Hamilton, Paris Hilton, Kate Upton, Ed Helms, Hugh Grant, Bob Taft, 67th governor of Ohio, John Cena, Cokie Roberts, Mickey Rourke, Dave Crosby, Boston Tea Party Boy, Samuel Howard, Barack Obama, Brad Pitt, 31st governor of Maine, 3rd and 5th governor of Vermont, signer of the Declaration of Independence, bewitched actress Elizabeth Montgomery, Nelson Rockefeller, the man that shot President Reagan, Norman Rockwell, Julia Child, Aldous Huxley, The Hunt, T.S. Eliot, George H.W. Bush, Richard Nixon, Jimmy Carter, Bing Crosby, Alec Baldwin, Anderson Cooper, Bill Nye the Science Guy, John Ritter, Benedict Cumberbatch, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, 45th governor of Massachusetts, Admiral William Halsey, railroad car inventor Henry Sessions, George W. Bush, Richard Gere, Gerald Ford, Britney Spears, Howard Dean, Jeb Bush, Chevy Chase, Oliver Platt, Warner Von Braun, the Nazi, Boris Johnson, U.S. Senator from Illinois, Tiny Tammy Duckworth, Billy Bush, Michael Bennett, U.S. Senator from Colorado, Hal Holbrook, Linda Gray, wife of Chester Arthur, signer of the U.S. Constitution, Post Malone, first governor of Minnesota, Billie Eilish, Jane Fonda, Steve Young, Peter Funk, Alfred Borden, the astronaut, English pole explorer Sir Randall, Bill Belichick, author of To Kill a Mockingbird, Warren Buffett, Frank Lloyd Wright, Roy Rogers, Orson Welles, General James Longstreet, Sigourney Weaver, John McCain, Sarah Palin, Jordan Peele, Bridget Fonda, Orson Bean, Emily Post, Taylor Swift, Ken Byrne, Pete Buttigieg, Daniel Burnham, Ali Wentworth, Paul Walker, Herman Melville, signer of the Declaration of Independence, Button Gwinnett, 15th governor of Maryland, Dakota Fanning, Walt Disney, 6th prime minister of Canada, 31st president of Peru, first lady of Dwight Eisenhower, John Lithgow, from Harry and the Hendersons, Nathan Hale, the first woman in space, 14th to 17th governor of Massachusetts, Frederick Law Olmsted, the fraudulent faker from friggin' Barbara Bush, first lady of President Woodrow Wilson, Robert Louis Stevenson, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Maggie, Pete Seeger, first lady of President Herbert Hoover, Judy Garland, Paul Giamatti, 59th governor of Massachusetts, Michael Strahan, Suze Day, first lady of President Taft, Liza Minnelli, Matt Tom Hanks, Dick Cheney, Betty Davis, George O'Keefe, 32nd governor of Massachusetts, James Spader, Ezra Pound, Jesse James, and of course King Henry III, and King Edward I, and King Louis VI, and William the Conqueror, and King Robert, and Alfred the Great, and Charlemagne. And it all started, or at least some of it started, right here, inside these walls. You still don't believe that a small group of families run this world? Well, then I got a bunch of fake products to sell you, such as this melted Tweety Bird popsicle, amazingly lifelike Jack Sparrow cookie, this incredibly useful warning sign, this inside-out teddy bear, this poorly designed slide for children. Still don't really know what they were thinking here, but it's for sale. Also, this poorly designed Batman water gun, which is especially fun to fill up, I'm told. There's also this guy hanging out in my swimming pool if you want to take him home too for a few bucks. Or actually, you could take him home for free. Then also I drew you a picture of a quactus. I must be going now. I hold my head in shame for the way this ended up. Goodbye, world. I'll see you soon.